We got a bidet!
Hey everybody, and welcome back to another video. In today's video, we got a movie discussion for you. There's quite a bit that we have to talk about that's about the film, like our thoughts and whatnot. So I think we're gonna try to get through, what was this movie about? What do you probably want to know about plot details if you want some spoilers? And then we got some nitty-gritty to talk about, because we definitely have some thoughts about this one. So we've given you plenty of time where if you wanted to avoid spoilers, you had the time to click away, but here we go. So this is Creed 3. This is the third one in the Creed series, but it's definitely, I don't know what number it would be in the Rocky series, quote unquote. I think 6 Rocky films and then 3 more here. Maybe this is the 9th film. That's my guess. And we start this movie off with a flashback scene, and there's these 2 kids. One of them it seems to be like a really good boxer, and they're going, between different areas where this person would be fighting in different rings and stuff. And eventually, after kind of setting the mood of them being friends and kind of what they were up to as kids, we eventually get to a scene where they're at a party store, liquor store. And what happens is that one of the younger kids is about to walk into the store, and he sees somebody and he says his name. I think his name is Lonnie. And the guy goes like, huh? And then the kid just wails on him. And then the little kid gets the tables turned on him, and the person he was trying to beat up, that dude's buddy, starts beating on him. And then one of the second of the 2 friends that we're focusing on comes out of the car, and we basically cut away. We don't see too much of what's going on with this interaction in front of the party store first. I don't know about you, Sarah, but I had a hard time keeping track of who was who. So that's why I kind of am being vague with who is who in that scenario. Because name drops were kind of scarce.
They, in my opinion, made it pretty somewhat clear who Adonis was and the other guy. The problem for me is that this is the first Creed film I've seen. I have not seen Creed 1 or 2, so I'm skipping ahead right to number 3. So when they said Adonis, I didn't know who that was. But I at least knew it was one of the 2 kids.
Right. Yeah, it was kind of like a 50-50 shot. They do have a small scene where if you recognize Adonis's mom, she says Adani or something, is trying to see if he's asleep, and that's when he sneaks out of the house, and you have an idea that that's who it is, but I kind of like forgot right away just because it was hard to keep track. But anyways, going back. So after we are done with this scene, then we start to see that Adonis has basically done his last fight, and he won, and now he's retiring, and he has his own gym, which is nice. And he has been training or facilitating training for the next heavyweight champion of the world.
Like a team manager.
Yeah. So like, he owns the gym. He's got some coaches in there, and the coaches do the nitty gritty work, whereas he comes in every now and then to give his 2 cents about things. Let's see. So after a couple of like discussions, setting the tone of what's going on with the gym, and showing that he's the owner and whatnot, he comes outside, and there's this dude that's kind of leaning on his car, and he is very off and wondering what is this dude doing, and turns out that it is his friend from when they were kids, and they hadn't seen each other in a long time. And it seems somewhat confrontational just from the tension or the mood. Like something's a little off here. You know, you think if they were buddy buddy back then, maybe it would be a little more engaging, talking to each other, seeing each other for the first time in a long time, but it wasn't. And what it turns out to be is that Adonis takes his friend out to um, lunch. It kind of seems like it's around lunchtime. We can establish his friend's name is Damien, or Dame as he likes to be called for short. So they're having a nice lunch, and Dame is telling him, you know, I've been in jail for 18 years, and, you know, you, being Adonis, were able to live basically the life that I didn't. Because turns out that Dame was the one that was really good at boxing back when the flashback scene was happening. I had wondered if the boxing person was Adonis just because his dad was big into boxing. So that's where my confusion was going. And wondering if I had heard the name wrong in the beginning. So Dame is telling him, you know, he's wanting to just right now. I want to catch up where I left off, and I want what is basically rightfully mine because I was the best back then. And Adonis is trying to tell him, you know, you can't just jump in. You have to build this up. You have to earn it. It takes time. But Dame is having none of that. So basically, what happens for the next good chunk of the movie is that Adonis is letting Dame into his life a little bit. He's letting him meet his family. His wife invites Dame to a producer party because now she is a producer of music. She's not necessarily being the artist that is performing. So she has like this big party that she invites him to. He meets their daughter, which the daughter is deaf. So he's kind of like learning a little bit of sign language there too. Let's see. I think there was. Oh, and he meets his mom at one point. No, not when they're older. I forget. Hold that thought. There's a reason why they don't meet. So Adonis is letting Dame a little bit more into his life, just kind of showing him where he's been, where he's at, like showing him his trophy case and stuff. And it's very apparent that Dame really wants a shot at this title thing, even though he's being super impatient. And it's really interesting throughout this part of the film because he doesn't really seem like a bad guy. He just seems like a guy that's impatient. He doesn't seem evil, so to speak. So he goes to this party with or for Adonis's wife, and what happens is that it seems really nice. Everything is going well, and eventually, we see the person that is training in Adonis's gym, which is going to have a shot at a match with Drago, which was the person that Adonis fought in the second movie.
His name was Felix.
Yeah, the guy that's being trained at Adonis's gym. Felix gets to go up against him, and Dame knew about that because he like practiced with him at the gym. Just because Adonis is letting him use the gym to maybe prep for a chance at a boxing career. And what we find out is that there's someone else at the party and he breaks Drago's hand. And so now there's an issue. We had this really big match that was supposed to happen between Felix and Drago, and now they need someone to fill in. And Adonis gets this bright idea to be like, well, you know what? I think I can do a win-win in this situation if we have Dame fight Felix for the title. And so everything still seems pretty good. And then when we actually get to the fight, there was a very interesting shot. And I thought it was, if there's anything that I thought was really cool about this film, it was this shot. So Adonis goes to talk to Felix and everything is great. But he also, he's friends with both sides. And he's the one that's putting the match together. So he goes to see Dame as well. And he talks to Dame a little bit. Things seem a little weird. Like they're still not eye to eye yet. But there's a shot where Adonis goes to leave and they're both on the opposite sides of the wall. And it's kind of like they're looking at each other, but they're not. It's kind of like when you walk away and you You look off in the distance for a second thinking, and you're like, nah, it'll be all right. And then you leave. This is what I got from that scene is that they're both just kind of thinking about the other person and they're like, yeah, I'm not eye to eye with you. And that the wall was a nice like visual division between the two. So that's what I thought was really cool about that shot. We get on to the fight, and for me, this is the first time that I think I've seen some like legitimate cheating in boxing just because I don't watch real boxing, if you want to call it that, like live on TV. I've only seen like film adaptations of boxing, and we see that um, Dame actually does some cheating. He starts using his elbow, and he gets penalized for it. They do address that. I don't know if it's frowned upon, but he's like deliberately trying to punch into the shoulders. Um,
There's a certain way that he's punching them that if you know boxing, it probably makes sense to you. But for those who don't know boxing, like myself or Jeremy, essentially he's trying to hit him in a way to intentionally hurt him instead of
yeah,
trying to win the fight. Like he's trying to think of it as like unsportsmanlike conduct.
he's very unprofessional, which Felix's coach is telling Adonis multiple times before this fight, like you can't let Dame fight because he's out here with a chip on his shoulder. He's trying to hurt people, not actually do the sport. Um, so we actually get to see that play into this scene where he is deliberately trying to destroy Felix as opposed to just win the match. Um, which in his opinion, in his mind, that's the way to win. So eventually Felix does get a couple of good jabs in on him. I think we see that he actually breaks one of Dame's teeth or something because they go to pull his mouthpiece out and he spits a tooth out.
That was so gross.
It was interesting. I didn't know what to think about that, but then when I saw the tooth, I was like, oh yeah, he's messed up. Um, but ultimately Dame does win and he hurts Felix. He's able to recover. We see Felix later on, but he's definitely messed up.
Well, instead of, recovering in his workout room or whatever, he's in an ambulance going to the ER.
Yeah.
So he's hurt pretty bad.
And his mom, like, I'm pretty sure I thought on her clothing was like blood or something, like she was trying to hug her son because he had blood on his chest. I think his mom was all bloody too, just from, trying to embrace her son. Um, so Adonis doesn't really know what to think. And so he gets like I think a text from his mom saying like we have to talk. And he goes to his mom's place and his mom has all these letters. And the letters were from Dame when he was in jail. And he was trying to write to Adonis, checking in on him and, being friends. But Adonis's mom kept all of these, so he never got the letters, meaning he never responded, which led Dame to believe that he was kind of deserted and on his own. And going through these letters, Adonis finds a picture of when Dame was in jail, and the person that was on the news headlines that broke Drago's hand was friends with Dame in jail. So Adonis, it triggers in his mind like this was not, all a coincidence. There was a setup here. And so he goes to confront Dame about it. And, Dame is all hopped up on, being the champion and stuff. And he has a party out at the beach. And when Adonis was trying to get answers, basically Dame is just playing him as a fool and saying, kind of like, now that I am where I am, I don't need you kind of a thing. It even gets to the point where Dame like punches Adonis in the face. And this is what really triggers Adonis to make that leap into thinking, I have to fight him now. I have to basically put him in his place and take him off his high horse.
I will say before Adonis got punched and he's trying to approach Dame to talk to him. One of Dame's bodyguards, if you will, for the party was trying to push Adonis off, and Adonis just punches him right in the face and knocks him out like a one punch hit. And that was a pretty sweet moment.
Yeah.
I like that.
So he's still got it to a degree at this point. Um, but what we see, so what kind of snowballs here is that they both, you know, they're set up for this fight. Adonis is talking on a sports show saying, things are kind of iffy right now, and Dame calls in while he's there, and then basically that's how they got the fight all set up. Is Dame was calling him out, just giving him crap, so to speak, over live television, and then that's when Adonis finally announced that they're going to have a fight. They both have their little training montages, and then we get to the fight at the end. I know I'm really glazing over some of this stuff that happened in the movie, but again, this is what's happening primarily in the film. We get to the main fight, and the two of them are going back and forth. What's interesting here that's different from some of the other films in the series is that they kind of get like a out of body type moment. I don't know if that's how you want to call it, but basically the world changes so that like when Dame is punching Adonis, that Adonis is like on the other side of some jail bars, like the bars are behind him. It's kind of like he's like punching into his past. Um, and it's just the two of them. There's nobody in the stand. There's no referees, no nothing, and it's just really between the two of them. Ultimately, between this fight, it goes back and forth. But Dame is all about power, whereas Adonis is about, you know, being more into the sport and, landing hits the proper way as opposed to just wailing into somebody. And they talk about that throughout the film a couple of times where boxing isn't about power and violence. Boxing is about
timing and technique.
yes, timing and technique. Thank you. So essentially what's happening is that Dame is tiring himself out with all these power blows that he keeps missing. Of course, he lands a couple of them, but he is missing a good handful. And I think it was round 12 or 13-ish is
final round.
Final round. Sorry, my boxing knowledge is a little off, but they were in round 12, and Adonis eventually knocks him out. There's a couple of uppercut moves that Dame just isn't used to, and we actually hear him say a little later that Adonis has learned a couple of moves that he hasn't seen before, and my guess is that those were the ones. So Adonis wins the match. He is the heavyweight champion of the world, basically takes from Dame what he had, for what, a week or more than a week, but very, very short lived. Because I know there's quite a bit of time between matches in the boxing world. But where this movie just kind of wraps up is that Adonis goes to Dame's side of the locker room, and they basically tell each other, it wasn't either one's fault in particular what happened, and then they just kind of have an understanding so that they're finally eye to eye together, and they seem to be friends at the end of it all. So that's pretty much what you need to get from the movie as far as these two characters behind Sarah and I, Dame and Adonis. There's a couple of subplot things that happen. One, Adonis's daughter, she is deaf. And we see like I said, a handful of sign language things. But she's a little aggressive in school. There's a school bully that ripped her art piece and she punches her right in the face. And so she's kind of getting an interest in boxing. So Adonis is trying to teach her. That's where we get the boxing isn't about violence. It's about the sport and the timing and technique. And he's trying to tell her, I'm not out there just to beat people up. I'm there because it's a sport. And so he's trying to teach his daughter about, what he loves. Adonis's mom is having health issues, and she dies in the film.
From a second stroke.
Yeah, from a second stroke. And then
kind of a heartfelt moment about her talking to Adonis, but because of her being in the process of her second stroke, she thinks she's talking to Apollo.
Right.
and about how she forgives him and stuff, and what Adonis has taught her about being a great son and all that heartfelt stuff.
Right. And I think I already covered this. Adonis's wife is no longer being a performing artist. She is now a producer because her hearing is going. So she wants to try to preserve her hearing as much as possible. So she has stepped back in that regard. Um, so those are kind of the little things that were sprinkled in throughout, as opposed to the overarching story between Adonis and Dame.
There's one more thing that I want to touch on, being that you mentioned the scene when they were kids at the liquor store.
Yep.
So they go back to that later in the film to kind of really full circle what had happened there. And so Dame had pulled out a gun to try to help protect Adonis, and they don't ever show him shoot it, but essentially the cops arrive and uh, Adonis runs and is able to get away, whereas Dame goes down for what happened, and supposedly that's how he got his 18 years in prison because of his prior convictions.
Right. Yeah, that's a good thing to bring up. I shouldn't have glazed over that.
So I think that's why Dame, or not Dame, I'm sorry, Adonis has a lot of guilt for what happened to Dame, and that's why he wants to help him so much.
Right. And that's sprinkled in throughout the film. I think near the end is where we finally get uh, all of it put together, so to speak. But yeah. So the one thing that we should, like you mentioned before, you have not seen Creed 1 and 2. I think you've seen up until Rocky 4.
I believe so.
So what was your opinion about the film?
So I obviously knew who Creed was, and being Apollo Creed, and I'd kind of talked to Jeremy a little bit before seeing this movie of like, hey, catch me up, what am I kind of missing here, at least in terms of who these characters are. So I had a basic understanding of who Adonis is, and from the trailer and whatnot. But like I didn't really know his family and stuff because that was kind of developed in Creed 1 and 2, at least from what Jeremy told me. um the first thing I told you when we walked out of that theater and you asked me what did I think was boring. I don't feel like it was as inspired as some of the other films that I've seen from these series. I didn't really feel the connection between the characters. There was a lot of weird melodrama that just seemed unnecessary and taking away from the heart of the film. There were times where I could tell they were trying to make me feel for a character. And one of the scenes in particular that I was like, oh boy, they're trying to go back to me, they were trying to emulate one of the Rocky films and how Rocky was pretty poor and he was in a crappy apartment. And so they showed Dame in his apartment, and his apartment looked okay, but like they showed him washing his socks in the sink with a bar of soap because clearly he couldn't afford to wash his clothes and he apparently only had like the one outfit or maybe two outfits. So trying to show that he's really poor and doesn't have a whole lot to his name, but that he's trying to do what he can to be to where he needs to get, right? So like I could see these little pieces like that where they were trying to make you feel for the character, but they were such quick moments that it took me a solid half hour to realize that's what they were trying to show with that piece of the film.
I had wondered if it was something to do with boxing, so I didn't even make that connection.
At least I think that's what was happening. That's what it looked like to me. There's just they focused a lot on the wrong things, I think, and there were a lot of pieces that didn't make sense to me that even after talking to you, it sounds like it didn't make sense to you either. One of the big pieces, which I'm trying to say that it's not because I haven't seen the films, it's just that it didn't make sense because it was bad writing. One of the big things is, I kept waiting for them to show that he shot the gun, like that he killed somebody or something, because to get 18 years, that's a really long time. I know they said he had prior convictions, but at this time, when they're kids, he's driving. So I'm gonna say he's what, maybe 17, 20, somewhere in there ish. Um,
I mean, old. I mean, I think they were around the same age, but they had to have been young enough where Adonis's mom was checking to see if he was asleep and in bed. You know what I
I
mean?
would say Adonis was probably 14, and Dame, we know that Dame is a couple years older than him. So Dame is probably somewhere around 17 to 20, and Adonis is probably around 14-ish. That's what he looked like to me anyway. It could have been 12, I suppose, but it still seems a little young. Maybe he was 16, but it seems a bit of a stretch. But anyway, so to have a couple convictions before you're even at the like 17 to 20 years old age, and then to just be having a gun and now you get 18 years in prison and you didn't even shoot it. Like I kept waiting for them to show that he shot it and they never showed that. It seems very unconvincing and very confusing. They talked about the guy that Adonis was beating up being Lonnie, and there's a whole lot of extra drama thrown in here between Adonis and his wife, and her saying, "Come on, tell me what's going on. Why are you upset?" And him, "I don't want to talk about it." And it just, I understand that that's kind of real life, but you don't watch movies necessarily just to reenact real life husband wife drama, to have it be drawn out that much. I think it was really overdone. But what we eventually learn after she finally pulls it out of him was that Lonnie was the group home dad in the group home that Adonis and Dame lived in when they were kids. And they showed a scene for like maybe all of 5 seconds of that home where one of them was getting beat. But they made it such a teeny tiny focus that honestly, I thought that they were just training for boxing. It didn't make sense that like the dad was beating them. I didn't get that from that. Did you?
I think 5 seconds is generous. I think it was like one, maybe half a second, because I saw the face and I could hear like the kind of like yelling slash being in trouble type tone from him. I didn't know what to pick from that. I didn't understand who he was. I'm glad you picked up on it more than I did. I thought it was just someone else that was in the home and they were just beating up on him like a bully. But
I I don't know that it was the dad. I just know later in the film he says that Lonnie was a dad in the home
oh, okay, I missed that.
and that they weren't bad, that they weren't good kids, but nobody deserves to be beaten like they were.
Right.
So I kind of pieced together that Lonnie must have been beating on them when they were kids, even though when we saw that scene, it was much earlier in the film, and it looked like they were just training to be boxers. Like you're training, not that this is a good thing, but like you're training a child to be the next ultimate champion. When they're ridiculously young and way too young to be training the way that they were training. So that is why Adonis was beating on Lonnie. But what doesn't make sense to me that they kind of completely glazed over, or maybe it was in Creed and 1 and 2, because again, I haven't seen them. Why was Adonis in a group home?
I don't know. Like I I've seen the other two movies, but I don't remember. Um Maybe I can try looking it up really quick.
While you're looking that up, it had me questioning everything. Like, is this not Apollo's son? Where did this guy come from? Did they adopt him? I guess to some extent you could say it doesn't matter whether he's adopted or not because he's still their son and stuff, but just to have that extra thing thrown in there, it just seemed so um unusual, and to make you really not understand who the character is or where they came from, it it's a big plot hole. That's really what it is. Um, I feel like they focused way too much on him not wanting to tell his wife than what they could have been doing is say more flashbacks of him just, the memories coming back to him as a PTSD survivor would, get flashbacks and stuff like that of, what actually was happening. So if we saw that for more than half a second, 5 seconds, however short it was way too short to understand what was going on. Um, if we actually understood what that was, I think that would have developed his character a lot more than just the fact that he didn't want to talk to his wife. Did you find anything?
What I'm reading is it says on Wikipedia that he was in a juvenile detention center and he was getting into fights all the time. He was sent to solitary confinement, and then Mary Creed, Apollo's widow, meets with Donnie and adopts him, informing him that he is Apollo Creed's son, sired from an extramarital affair. So it sounds like Sarah and I might be a little I wouldn't say misinformed, not informed enough because we haven't watched the other two lately, but I feel like if this is going to be something as crucial to the film as it is, because as crucial as it is to the film, I think it should have been flushed out a little bit more. Um, in this film and not just relying on what happened in the previous two so much. Because it's been a while since the second one. It's been a while since the first one, and I hardly remember much of anything from his backstory except for the fact that Adonis Creed or Apollo Creed is his dad. So the first thing I thought of, but like you, why would he be in this home? If his dad was this big fighter and had a whole bunch of money. So um, I guess that's just something that we aren't informed about, and it's a little bit on us for not knowing. But uh, I think this movie could have done a little better job focusing maybe on some of that stuff as opposed to some of the extras that it did. But
I have some more things to discuss that are more filming related rather than plot related. Is there anything more plot wise that you wanted to add? Did you like the film? What did you think of the film?
like I said, I've seen the other two movies, um, and coming off of the second movie, because the second movie kind of followed in the footsteps of the Rocky films because it brought back Drago. Um, I kind of wonder where was Creed 3 going? Is it going to kind of still do this callback type stuff, or is it going to try to establish itself? Um, and unfortunately, it does establish itself, but not without some bad blood between people that are making the film. And I think that really carried over into the film. So when Sarah told me what she thought about the movie, I wasn't ecstatic or anything coming out. I thought it was an all right film. But I felt that there was something that was definitely missing. And I think what was missing in this film was heart. I felt like this movie didn't have any heart. I think what this movie did have was is they looked at what is the formula for a boxing movie and how can we inject what background story we want to into the formula, and then whatever is spit out from the formula is what we get from the film. And I think because they tried to do something on their own, and I'll talk about what I mean by that in a minute. I think by them trying to do something on their own, and I think this is Michael B. Jordan's directional debut. I could, I, I think so. And him trying to take the Creed character and move it in the ways that he wants to. I think there was some missteps here. So the problem that happened when I was mentioning that something happened behind the scenes is that there's like 6 different producers on this film, and one of them is Sylvester Stallone. If you know the history of the Rocky films, Sylvester Stallone came up with the films, but he sold the rights to filming and all that to another producer as long as he was guaranteed to be Rocky in the film.
According to IMDb, this is his first director, like the first film he's directed.
Okay, so it is his directional debut. Um, so since then, Stallone has written everything. He's made every single character. He's made every single inspiring speech in the films. Um, but he has not owned it, unfortunately, because he sold those rights in the very beginning. And so what happened with this film is that when, Stallone was a part of the group, he basically got outed. This is not the film that Stallone would have wanted, is not the direction he wanted to go. Um, he has gone on to say publicly that this is not what he wanted. And I think even though his name is in the credits, I don't think he had anything to do with this story because he's also gone on to say that he will never watch this film. So I don't think he had much to do with it. And the thing is that it was Stallone's writing and his passion for this series that made all the other ones feel like they had heart to them. And I think by taking him out, this one lost all of that, unfortunately. There wasn't one gripping thing that was said in this film where I was like, oh, yes. Like if you watch any other of the Rocky films, there is a speech in there that should hit you in the heart. And if it doesn't, wow. But by taking that out, um, this movie is very basic slash bland. Um, what
I
I
did
also,
like the main idea of the story. I just think it was executed really poorly.
yeah, I think I would agree that I think that the idea was pretty good. It was different. It wasn't relying on stuff that's happened previously in the Rocky series, which is really nice. But I think it was slightly mishandled. It could have been a little bit better. Um, Lost my train of thought there for a sec. Oh, and so there's also little things that are happening in this film that I thought was disrespectful to Stallone because once he was kind of not being a part of it, they did what they wanted to with the film. There's a couple of things in this film where it was pretty cringy just because I remember different things from the past films and seeing how they're trying to apply it here. Um, Forget what the exact wording was, but Adonis had said something along the lines of like, um, he had echoed something that Rocky said in the past, but he started it off with what Rocky said and then changed it with the second part of it. It was something like, I don't know, fighting isn't about, or I don't remember what the wording was. I just remember him saying it. He was saying it to one of the boxers, and the problem is that when he first started to say it, I could like hear Rocky in the back of my mind saying the phrase, and then he changed it, and it was kind of like, oh, like you're having Rocky in the film without having Rocky in the film. I think they referenced him a couple of times, but if you haven't seen the second movie, Rocky did not die in the second movie. He is still alive, but they shafted him in this film. He's like non-existent. Um, and then the second thing I really thought was disrespectful was the whole point of this film for Michael B. Jordan is to establish Creed as an individual character. Like he is separate from Rocky again because Rocky's hardly even in this film. And when he wins the fight at the end, they play the Rocky anthem. Creed should have his own anthem if he wants to be separate from Rocky, but instead it's kind of like spitting in Stallone's face, saying, that that's our theme now, kind of a thing, because you're not a part of this project and we're still gonna keep it. Um, you know, Everybody, if you play that song and you ask people what is this song, they're gonna say, "Oh, that's Rocky." They're not gonna say, "Oh, that's Creed." You know, so I think that it was the film. Not only was it very to the formula of a boxing film with lacking heart, but I also thought the film was very disrespectful to where it's coming from. So I guess with all that being said, I don't think it was a very good film, to be honest.
The other things that I was going to mention that were more filming related rather than plot related, since we're talking about things like, the music and the Rocky theme and whatnot, was especially in the very beginning, a lot of the camera work I found to be very shaky and kind of weird angling, following different characters as they walk and stuff. And um, I I'm not a big film buff in terms of, I took one film class in college. It was a very basic gen ed class. It's not like I have, all this grand knowledge on filming and whatnot. Um, so trying to be careful on how much I critique something like that, but what I'm trying to get at is that it was filmed in a very weird and different way, at least in the very beginning. To the point where I was struggling with getting motion sick. I get motion sick pretty easily. There's a lot of things that make me motion sick that don't even bother Jeremy. But when a film starts out that way, where the camera work is shaky enough that I'm starting to get motion sick and I have to look away, if I have to look away, then I'm not watching the film. That's what I came here to do. Um, and
You
part of it was
To be fair, you've seen some movies that have had that effect before, but it hasn't hit you the way that this one did, per se.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, some of it was the lighting too. There were a lot of scenes that were lit very weird, unusually bright, or that the color scheme was almost like the colors were popping too much. And I don't know if that was like an editing thing or a filter that was put on for certain scenes to make it seem more like daylight than what it really was or something. I can't place what exactly it is. I just know it was different and not in a good way. Um, I feel like it did get better towards, say, the middle of the film and like the end of the film. Like it was really more towards the beginning that I was having that issue. But it wasn't pleasant.
There was a couple of scenes in this film where the cinematography definitely felt awful. There is a shot specifically near the end of the film where, after the fight and everything, Adonis goes back to where the ring is, and his daughter and mom are there, and he kind of has like a little play fight with his daughter, because his daughter is very interested in boxing. And there's a shot where Adonis is like looking off in the distance, and then he leaves and goes on his way. And it looked awful. Like I could not tell if that was a real shot, like if he was actually at a stadium, or if it was just really bad CGI, like green screen. So like little things like that really pull you out of the film, because like I'm sorry, but when Stallone is in charge, the movies were looking great. Like when he was a part of this stuff. And I feel like this was a slip by Michael as far as his directional debut. Just some of the things look sloppy. Maybe it was we're running out of budget, so we're gonna, cut back on this shot, and this shot just because they're not as important or something. But yeah, that was just an example, but there's a handful of scenes that are like that where I was kind of like, is this filmed on a location or is this CGI? Because if it's CGI, it is awful. And if it's real location, what is going on? Kind of a thing. So I guess to kind of bring it all together, the film was a bit bland. Um, I feel like because they stepped away from what made these movies, in my opinion, iconic, is why this movie feels so dull. Um, Again, Stallone is the heart of this thing, and with him being removed, essentially, um, I think so did the heart of the series. I know they've already greenlit Creed 4 and supposedly some spin-offs. I don't know if I want to see those films coming off
They
of
got some work to do.
they need to talk to Stallone. That's what they need to do. because I think they're trying to basically copy his homework and they forgot a couple words, kind of a thing. So yeah, that was our discussion about Creed 3. If you enjoyed this type of video, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. We will be covering a lot of the movies this summer, the big movies coming out. So if you enjoyed this type of video, look forward to those. Drops a like if you liked the video and drops a comment letting us know if you saw Creed 3 and if you liked it. Were we wrong? Do you agree with us? What do you got? And then, as always, everybody, thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.